Greetings! Welcome to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of Golarion, a setting, Pathfinder role-playing game system? If you are, join me, your host and guide here, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, as I open up a gateway through the universe to Golarion and guide you to that gateway. Together with me, you will remain safe. Please do leave me a little bit of a tip before we go. Subscribing over the YouTube side of things, liking the video, and letting me know what you think of our topic today, because it's going to be an interesting one, in the comments. Let's go to Golarion. I like to get this party started. Take my hand. Alright. So today's going to be interesting because this is a video I'm going to want to revisit. Yes, I know, when I do these videos, I do them as if I'm not going to revisit them. But this is one that I want to revisit. And why is that? Because we're going to be talking about the Rougarou today. The Rougarou is shown in two books from first edition, for the back end of Circuit first edition, Bestiary 6, and then the Born of the Sun's Grace from the Tyrant's Grasp Adventure Path, the final first edition Adventure Path. We know nothing after that point in time. Why do I want to talk about them? Why do I want to introduce them? Let's talk about who they are. Let's talk about why. It's important for you to learn about them and maybe be interested in them. So the Rougarou. They're from Arcadia, a continent we know very little about. The reason why it was in the Sun's Grace book was because Zapottle. Zapottle is an Arcadian city we know about from that state, from that area, that we know about because of that. If we hadn't visited Zapottle in that adventure, we know very little about Arcadia. There's so very little about it. But we know there's a species. They're wolf-like humanoids that can shapeshift into wolves. They have a wolf head, they're covered in gray-brown fur, they're a little slightly taller and heavier than your various humans, and the fact is, sometimes they're mistaken for werewolves. But they aren't. This transformation from this hybrid form to wolf form does not help with that, but they're not lycanthropes. The fact is, Rougarou are enemies with lycanthropes, especially werewolves. They will hunt them down, seeing them as, for whatever reason, against them. They aren't very widespread. They're a smaller race. Now, granted, because of Arcadia's loose connection with the rest of the world, you can find Rougarou outside of Arcadia. But in Arcadia, they are more plentiful. They live in secluded communities, regardless. They're protected family and friends. They have their own strict code of laws that they believe in. In Arcadia and their various lands, they live in wetland areas, swamps, marshes. But again, even in small numbers, they are rare and can be found outside of Arcadia. It doesn't mean you couldn't find one somewhere else. The fact is, though, that sometimes some members of the Rougarou find themselves outside the law, giving into more debased, wild elements. Becoming things like bandits that basically go about the countryside. They'll oftentimes band together with other groups of their own that are basically these, more evil types. They despise the rest of the Rougarou as a whole. But the rest of the Rougarou basically see them as betrayers in a lot of ways. Hunt them down, punish them for their deeds. Basically, by going outside, you might be outside of our law because you're no longer in our community. But because you're leaving our community to break those laws, it's even more of an insult. Basically, they want you to keep and obey their set of rules no matter where you go. If you go travel somewhere else, granted, you should probably obey the rules of where you go to. But you should also follow the rules of our community. They speak common, but they have their own language, Rougarou. They also speak. That's important too. They age like humans. Another thing about them that you should know about. But basically, yeah. The foul deeds of our kin. And the last thing to know about is that there are rules to play them in first edition. There are stats for them. Could you adapt this to second edition, something with the various ancestries that you have? Probably. Some of the various species that are more animalistic. You could probably come up with something that would be akin to that. But, yeah. There's Rougarou. It's that simple. It's that small. There's nothing about them. This is why I would like to talk about them. And that's where we're going to take a step back from the just chatting about lore here to chat about why I did this video here in particular. I want to do more like these. Point out interesting species and groups and ancestries that aren't Golarion, that are unique on their own. That would be cool to talk about. This is one of those ones that I'm like, hey, maybe if we all talk about that and are interested in stuff from Arcadia, kind of like how TNZ got an entire book, we'll get an Arcadian world guide, Arcadian character guide, learn all about the various countries and nations of the continent of Arcadia, the various species like Rougarou and many of the others that we know by name but know very little about. If you're interested in Rougarou, maybe this is a good excuse that I've taught you about them to say, hey, I would love to explore these more. These, very loyal, protective, lawful, wolf-headed people that can shape change into wolves, that live in marshlands and basically stick to themselves most of the time. But also have that interesting juxtaposition of those that turn against them become those to hunt. And they're enemies of werewolves in particular. There's some fascinating aspects to them that tells me I want to know more. I want to revisit them. I want to do it in maybe a year or two to come back to Rougarou and be like, hey, let's talk about Rougarou. That's what I would like. And I hope I've inspired you to think of that way too. So thank you for joining me on this very short video today. Please check out all my other stuff. Twitch, on YouTube. Twitch is where I record all my tabletop-related stuff. Fall of Avaswell live play, 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, discussing tabletop, a kind of talk showy thing, kind of podcasty thing, Saturdays at 6. All tabletop stuff ends up on YouTube. All the other stuff, not there yet, which I do some gaming, chatting with friends, chatting things with friends, all that kind of stuff. But I'll probably do a VOD channel at some point in time. Check out my other older live plays. Check out my social media. And anyway, let me know what you think about this. Let me know. Give a little bit of subscription, a little like, but really let me know. Would you play Rougarou? Would you play it in first edition, second edition? What do you think about them? Does this inspire you to kind of yell out, hey, let's learn about Arcadia? We have that voice to Paizo. We will have that book. Anyway, until the next time, I bid all of you a deep and wonderful farewell.